Good morning. It's Rachel Jones from NXTWomen. I'm here with Jackie Hobson. Jackie has been working with veterans for many years, helping them in business development and as they come back and re-enter the workforce. Obviously, there are a lot of entrepreneurial traits that vets have and need to be shared with the world. So I'm really glad to have you here with us.
I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. Thanks for coming into the studio. And I'm just going to ask you about a little bit of background on how you became involved in veteran business development in the first place.
Okay. So when I was 17, I joined the Army. People think that's young, but I just wanted to go to boot camp. That's what I wanted to do.
Very cool.
So I stayed in the Army for 4 years. I did a 15-month tour in Iraq. During my tour, I met my husband. He's also an Army veteran. When we got home, we started businesses. So for 10 years, I ran a service-based photography business. And then for 6 years, I ran a brick-and-mortar retail store that I started from the ground up and then franchised.
Very cool.
And then I sold.
So you have a business head on you. How did being in the military help? Or what are the traits that you transferred from your military experience to business?
I think a lot of it's just the discipline that you already learned. So a lot of people think veterans are like already great to be entrepreneurs, and you read a lot of articles. I don't think there's a huge difference because in the veteran world, it's diverse, right? Mm-hmm. So there's tons of different personas within that group, but it kind of gives you a head start. So if you're the type of personality that wants to open a business and you've taken that discipline from the military and then you apply it, you're just kind of a step ahead of people that have never been in the military because you know how to work really hard. You do the task you don't want to. You're required to do missions even when you don't have the proper resources to do them. You don't tell your commander or your first sergeant, hey, I need this, this, and this, or I'm not, I won't be able to do the job. You get the
just
job
figure
done
it out.
Either way. Yeah. And you have to do that as entrepreneurs. So I just think they kind of have a head start because they've been trained that way. But
how do you help veterans start businesses or use their entrepreneurial skills to really just play that out into actual business experience?
So people always are surprised when I tell them the hardest part about entrepreneurs and veterans is they're like scattered and they're not organized. And they're like, what? Like veterans are supposed to be, yeah. And I was like, well, making your bed, really nice, is very different than running a business. And it's because you have to wear so many hats as an entrepreneur. And when you're in the military, you do your job and then you have a system in place. And if you need something, you know exactly where to go. And so it's really hard for veterans to kind of take all those responsibilities in and figure out, I need to do this and this and this and this. So they kind of just need a roadmap and some organizational help and then knowing the resources and the places they should go in order to get things done because otherwise they're just by themselves.
So my understanding, and I think many people's understanding is like veterans are great in the workplace because they follow directions, they like to follow through, they are committed. But entrepreneurship is like a totally different beast. Yeah. There's a lot of creativity, art, and just intuitiveness involved. How do you help veterans use that creative side of their brain when they've been using the logical, analytical side for so long?
So veterans are really good at franchises because that system's in place. And so a lot of franchisors will actually give discounts or completely waive franchise fees for veterans because they know once they're in a system, they're really, really good.
That's great information.
Yeah. So when it comes to when they're running their own thing, I think it's really just getting them with the right people because when you talk, back when they made coffee shops, like originally it was to get together and talk and network because ideas spring from that. And so now just getting the veteran in place to where they're maybe talking or connecting and networking with other veterans or other people that have those I can't speak. So they can be creative and come up with these ideas or build upon them is really good.
Is that natural for most vets to like network, to go into a coffee shop, to ask for help, to ask for input,
No, they're really reserved, and a lot of times they have trust issues.
Is it good for them? Is it good for them to network?
Yeah, it's definitely really good for them, but a lot of times that takes them outside of their comfort zone.
How do we plug our vets into resources like that, where they can learn the skills of networking, friendshipping, getting business ideas turned into actual businesses? Because I think there's so much potential out there. that, like you said, like just getting them to open up and talk about what their business idea is might be more difficult than, say, somebody coming out of college.
Well, I think for Utah, that's why we opened the Veterans Business Resource Center, is because there was this lack. And a lot of people in the Small Business Development Center, other business resource centers, they didn't really understand, like, why do we need something that specific? And it's because when you're a veteran, and you're speaking to another veteran, it helps with that trust issue. So we'll hold different networking events and trainings that are vet only.
Wow.
And that they're a lot more comfortable. And then the more I work, because we're used to
language.
And it's kind of a first step. And then I do other trainings as well. And I partner with other groups that I try to pull them to other groups too, because they can't just stay in their bubble.
So you're actually helping them do the networking.
Yeah, we do create things so I do a lot of different things, but that's one of them.
Tell me about why you're so passionate about working with vets. I mean, why are you continually staying connected to the veteran community?
Because it's part of your blood, once you go in. I really loved the military lifestyle. I joined before 9/11, and I don't know if I would have joined after, because I probably would have been a little more nervous. And I just wanted to go to boot camp and be a badass. Like, that's all I wanted to do when I joined the military.
The beauty of being 17.
Yes, I know, right? And I was a female, so I was like, Army's good enough. If I was a guy, I probably would have been Marines. But once I was in, I really fell in love with the culture. So for my tour in Iraq, I actually had to volunteer 3 times to finally get there. So I loved the culture and everything about it. I tell people I can wear that, like, veteran hat all the time, but I can also wear the spouse of a veteran hat or a spouse of the military, because my husband.
Tell us a little bit about what it means to be the spouse of a military vet.
So I never had to deal with a deployment. So when it came to being a spouse at the same time and having kids, like, it's a burden I'm glad I never had to do, because I think that'd be very difficult. But being a spouse, so my husband's 100% disabled vet, and so that creates just different challenges. And a lot of times people think it's easier because, oh, well, you were there too, so you understand. So that's probably easier than a normal spouse.
So it's an assumption that, like, you have the edge on the market of taking care of a disabled spouse.
Yeah, but especially where our combat was together, my husband he doesn't agree with that. He actually thinks it's much more difficult, because we were there every single day together for 15 months.
Wow.
Every single day. And I came home and I transitioned just fine, and he didn't. And so that's discouraging for him.
Tell me about how you've been supportive when you needed the support yourself. Like, how do you support a spouse that needs that mental, emotional clarity when you yourself are a vet?
That's kind of a hard question. You know what I mean? Like, because people always tell me, you have to take care of yourself. You need to take care of yourself, or make sure you're doing stuff. And the truth of it is, you just don't do that very well as a caregiver, and we've never really used the term caregiver until about the last year or two. So it's something that I'm working on, right? Like, I still have to take time for myself and do different things. But the spouse part and taking care of him and really working, it's a lot of it's trial and error and figuring out what works best for you, because every situation is so unique and there's too many variables. Everybody's life is unique, let alone mental illness affects everybody differently. And so you just have to figure out what works best for you. And it can be a really rocky road. What's
your support system like? Because you're in a unique situation where you are a vet, your husband's a vet, you're caring for a vet who needs, extra attention in terms of, specific issues, mental health and physical health. What's your support network looking like right now?
So I've opened up a lot. I've always been very, very conservative and, like, not talk to anybody when it came to, like, family and friends, because I was kind of guarding his ego, right? And always making sure I don't want judgment passed, because he's a great guy. And so I didn't vent, really. So I've been very protective of him and what people would think, because I hold him up high. And so I have a really good friend support system wise, but then I also, I just think making sure that the government takes care of you, like the VA and whatever benefits that you're supposed to have, that people go and get those, and that they don't tackle that beast on their own, right?
So it shouldn't be a pride issue. It should be
no. And a lot of people, they do a pride issue. There's veterans, there's like a persona, right, that they
tough.
train you. Well, we have one where they train you in the military to actually take advantage of everything too. Like if it's out there, it's supposed to be for you. So you have people that come and I'm going to go do this, this, and this. But then you have the other one, like you're saying that, I've been taught not to go to sick call and to drink water and you get better. And you don't do any of that. So trying to take them and realize, hey, these benefits are for you.
Especially when you have like long-term care issues.
Yeah. And you have the VA healthcare, right? And then you have, which some are better than others, but all of them, I'm a fan of them.
That's great to hear.
I am a fan of them. Well, especially because a lot of times they complain about time, but I have a daughter that has a specialist, and the first time she had to get into a regular specialist, it took her 7 months. So neither world is perfect, right?
Right, but you do have to tap into those resources.
Yeah, you definitely
needed at the time.
And I think the VA healthcare system is great. I also think having a good VSO, a veteran service officer, to kind of be there to advocate for you and make sure you get the benefits you need.
But that would be a hard transition, because people who go into the military are tough.
Yeah.
And then to come back and say, I need help, and these are the ways I'm going to get it. That's very vulnerable. Yeah. I really admire your ability to transition into that. Being able to ask for help and being more open. I think that's why we're doing these podcasts, is to kind of peel that top layer off so that other women, specifically wives of vets, can see this is really what it looks like on the inside. You really have to be unique and different in your approach to caring for your family members.
Yeah, I think for spouses too, they do need to realize that you can go and get help too. You could go to a vet center and you can go get counseling, and you can go join groups and different things that will help.
Have those things been helpful for you as a spouse?
So I already said I don't really take care of myself very much when it comes to that. So there's a lot that I just let roll off my shoulders. You know what I mean? And I just kind of have this personality that I just have to get things done. And I don't think it's always healthy. And so I don't want to advise women to do that. But we have a unique situation. So on top of my husband, he's 100% for his PTSD. And then he has they can give you lots of different ratings. But his PTSD alone is 100%. And then he has other physical ones as well. So he has really bad PTSD. But then we actually have 3 of our 5 children have special needs. And so really there's just not a lot of time anyways.
So you're just caretaking.
It's just crazy.
100% of the time.
And my husband does really 100%. Actually good though. My husband does really well with the kids. But it is, I think 5 kids is a very stressful situation anyways. But then when you put in a few special needs, it's really hard too. So to have that stress at home on top of his normal everyday life stress makes it more difficult for him as well.
You're pretty amazing. Jackie, I just realized, got her undergrad and MBA in 3 years. So this is an amazing woman we're talking to today who really does pull herself up by her bootstraps and takes care of business. Tell me a little bit about the toolbox that you use for PTSD in your own home, because I think that's going to be helpful for women who are kind of going this by themselves or caring for somebody who suffers from PTSD. What are some of the tools in your toolbox that have been really helpful?
I think communication is key. I honestly do. But it's also knowing you need to know when to communicate, because if you try to communicate at a time that it's not a good time to communicate, you're kind of
give us an example.
You're building your own grave right there.
Give us an example of a time when you just need to let things ride for a minute.
Yeah. So in 2008 is when my husband got his 100% rating for his PTSD. That was a rough year. We did a couple inpatient hospitalizations, but it was all new to us. And I used to try to break him because it would snap him out of it. You know what I mean? He'd get really
shock factor.
Yeah. And then we could actually communicate. And now I don't do that. But it worked at the time, and I needed to communicate. So it's really important to get your needs met and be able to talk. But it's also you want to be safe, and you need to pick your best time. And it's really just time and figuring things out and being open.
So over time, you just figure out the style for your family.
Yeah. And so I know that there's sometimes, right, that I really, really need to talk to my husband, and it's really important. But I also know if I talk to him at a wrong time, he's not going to hear me, because he's going to be so stuck in his head that it's not going to go well.
That's a great tip, that you just have to be...
You have to be patient. You have to be willing to wait. And then it will go much better. But it's hard when you're in the moment and you really have something, it's difficult.
That'd be a cool communication class, I think, because, you know, we're living in a nation where so many suffer from PTSD and so many are caretakers for PTSD. I could see a course taught where like these kind of tools are shared. What other tools do you have in your toolbox for really working with your spouse?
So my husband is always really too hard on himself. But our marriage works really well because he does really well too, and he never gives up, and he never uses it as a crutch. So he has really hard times, and I can call him an asshole all the time. It's kind of his word, and he's been okay with it. But it's just in the moments, right? So you don't talk in those moments, but it's also...
You just remind him what's going on. That you're aware.
Yes. But he's been really good at understanding that it affects me differently. So we try to look at it not as this is who you are, right? Because it's this disease or this disorder or this issue, but it affects us negatively both. And so we try to both have a lot of patience with one another. He can't have patience with me when he's going through something. And that's why it's really important to time your communication with him.
I think that's a really powerful statement, is understanding that somebody can't have patience with you when they're going through their own crap, and to acknowledge and like be patient and allow them to kind of get through what they need to get through without demanding an extra emotional burden on them.
Yeah. But then using that fine balance that you're just as important and you need your needs taken care of, you just need to pick your right time. And so it's a lot to kind of know that I can't talk about these things right now. But to be able to pick those times. And then my husband's really good at being patient with me because he understands okay, I'm going to step backwards. If I talk to him in a wrong moment, it's an attack against him.
Oh, that makes sense.
If I wait and we have a conversation when he's not going through one of his like episodes or issues, it's a lot easier to have him remember that I'm not attacking him, and it's just the negative aspect of PTSD and how it affects my life.
Wow. I mean, that's really profound as I think about it, and how you've really mastered the art of understanding the nuances of, you know, his emotional waves, and knowing like when to like enter his space and when to give him space. That's profound and very teachable. I think that's going to be helpful for a lot of people who are working with people with PTSD, that you got to be really cognizant of those emotional waves.
Yeah. And I think as a spouse, you can totally get there, right? Like, because we can be out or even in the car, I can be with him and I can put my hand on his lap or his shoulder or whatever. And he knows, oh my gosh, I can't believe you can tell that I'm in that moment. But I know. And no one else would know. Like his mom wouldn't even pick up on it, right?
So
no
it's
one
your
would know.
acknowledgement, like you see him.
Yeah.
And is that what a lot of vets need, is just acknowledgement, like, I see you? It may not be verbal, but it's...
I think it definitely helps. It helps them to know, like, hey, I love you and I have your back and I see this is a hard time and it's not you. Because they already have so much transition, right? They already feel like a totally different person. Like my husband will say all the time, Chris is dead. And so it's that, if you lose a limb, and my husband didn't, but you don't try to get it back. You know it's gone.
So it's like a totally new life.
Yeah.
Like
and
totally
it's hard, and people
to...
have depression, right? Because they have to and that's, I can't imagine, right? But they know they have to transition. Where when you're talking with the mental illness and PTSD, they're so focused on trying to get back.
To where they were. Is that healthy or?
No, it's super unhealthy.
So what would you tell people in that situation where they're just clawing to get back to where they were, or clawing to be the person that they were? I think what you're saying is that's probably never going to happen.
No, it's never going to happen. But the problem is, if I took 2 years out of my life, right? I take 2 years out of my life and I go and have these experiences anyways, I'm going to change as a human being.
So you're not going to be able to go back.
Right? But it's just they look so negatively at how the PTSD and the war zone or the military transformed them that they forget that they would have been different anyways. Regardless of what they would have done in those 2 years or those 5 years, they would have been different. So there is never a going back for anybody.
Right. That's a healthy attitude, I think, to remember that none of us are ever going backwards. Yeah. We're always going to change. Is there a fear of what you're going to change into, or what that person is going to become as a result of these experiences?
I think the fear is that they're never going to be good.
Wow.
And
So your
they
job
have to
is...
adapt. And it's kind of helping them realize that it's okay for change and really showing them and highlighting the things they're still good at.
So really focusing on the positive and keeping them aware that you're noticing these changes and that it's okay.
Yeah.
You still recognize them.
Yeah.
Their essence.
And there's still cores that are the same too.
Mm-hmm.
And to try to help them realize they're not all different. It's just they're sort of different. And that's okay.
That's powerful for any relationship, I think, just to recognize that people do change from experiences. But PTSD is very powerful. And that, you know, just to reiterate, what you're saying is they really want to go back to being their old self. And that's not likely to happen.
Yeah. And I think that's why marriages struggle a lot. If you actually look at, I believe it was World War II, they had the highest divorce rate, but then they also had the highest remarriage rate. So it really kind of showed that it's not, the change isn't bad, but some people do have a hard time adjusting to it, including spouses, right? But then these veterans of World War II, they could go on and marry and have happy lives again, but it was a new life. And I don't think spouses need to do that, but it's both of them need to realize, a wife needs to realize, hey, my husband is different, and let's move forward on that and create our life different.
That's pretty profound. That you've been able to embrace, it's okay that he's not the same person that I married initially.
I married him after. So for me, I think actually that was easier. You know what I mean?
Really?
He had a late onset of PTSD. So we got married and he worked and he did things. And there were small little things that were off, but nothing major. So we were actually married for about 3 or 4 years before his PTSD hit full swing.
So you saw the...
So I did see the before, but I didn't see the completely before military.
What's helping him now? Are there things nutritionally, emotionally, mentally, as you move through continual transformation and as you see him really consistently changing over time? Are there things that are helping him make those changes?
So he hates therapy, by the way, which is also something I wouldn't recommend, to hate therapy and not do it. But that's very veteran-like. So...
it's common. It's common
yeah,
for them not to want to talk about it.
Yeah. So it's really, but he's done some therapy sessions where he'll talk about different things he does to cope. And the therapist will be like, you're really doing advanced therapy techniques that are really hard to teach a lot of patients. So he's really, really good at understanding himself. And a lot of it's, we're a decade into chronic PTSD. And it's changed, right? There's different things about it that have changed because we're really good at coping, but it's still there. And so you kind of go through cycles as PTSD where you're so tired of trying different things, right? You're tired, and so then you stop.
It's a monumental job that you're doing, staying married and just always.
Yeah. And you get your hopes up, right? Oh, we're going to try this, or we're going to try this, or okay, full steam ahead. And then it doesn't really work. In 2008, we did the combat cocktail. And then when I did my undergrad in psych, I did my, capstone or whatever on PTSD and medications. And it made me laugh. It was 7 years later, but I was like, almost everything they gave him is blacklisted now for PTSD because it does more damage than good.
So a lot of it's really trial and error.
Yeah, but that's the whole system. So in your life, you have to do trial and error, but they're still in the system of trying to help. They throw millions of dollars at it and they can't fix the problem. So I would say everything's still in trial and error. But really just learning. The more you can learn, even getting advice from other people or listening to this, hey, I'm going to try that, right? It's going to be different for what someone else does from what I do, but just that inspiration, right, of someone else, or, I'm going to try that, and to not completely give up. You go through times where you are kind of exhausted. And so, okay, well, we're living decent right now. And so we're going to go with it, but we're not going to try anything new because we just can't handle that. We're just too exhausted to try that cycle again. But it has transformed. So it's been interesting because this last year was a really, really hard year. I actually think it's the closest we've ever been to suicide, which is crazy because I've always told people our marriage and our lives are better than they've ever been because we're super good at coping now. And our relationship's super good with conversation, but that's kind of a point to, it's something that's always going to be there. So
it's just something that you're living with, and it gets worse sometimes before it gets better.
Well, and it's not even bad for me, right? Our marriage and our life is to a point where for most parts, and it is there's moments, right? But when you learn and you know when to communicate or when to do things or when they need space or when they need to go. Chris likes to lay on the bed when he's having a hard time, escape in the room and like listen to singing Tibetan bowls, whatever. You do whatever works for you. But you learn all these ways to cope. But the reason why we've been closer to suicide is because he's tired of coping. And I think it was that 10-year mark, right? Like it's been 10 years and we've kind of got it down to a science. Like we're pretty good. We have our moments. Like it's so not perfect, right? And they're frustrating and you have to have patience. And sometimes you get tired with patience. But overall, like we're really good. But it's still that I'm exhausted because I've been doing this for 10 years.
How do you find that hope when you realize like this is a long-term battle?
Well, as we kind of talked about already, like there's lots of changes and we're always growing and evolving and we're way better now than we were because we know coping mechanisms that work well. But the future will always change. And to say that like this is exactly, my husband may have PTSD for the rest of his life. He's going to, no question asked, right? But that doesn't mean it will be the exact same as it is right now. And so I always kind of think of it as a racetrack, right? Like when you're running a race, you're probably really tired, but if you can do one more curve, right? You just do one more curve and it's a little bit different. And
so you really have to dig into your military mindset where it's like, just get that 100 yards down.
And so for us right now, like we have one more year until our last is like in school full time. And he does a pretty good job being stay-at-home dad. He'll compare himself to me and then I'll be like, I don't do that. But he does a good job being a stay-at-home dad. It's really great with the kids. But that extra stress is really exhausting too. But I'm like, hey, like one more curve and all the kids will be gone like 9 months out of the year for a full day. Like that will give you time to really.
So you're really looking at these little landmarks that are ahead and keeping your eyes forward rather than, oh, it's been 10 years.
And I think having something, they need something that fulfills them, right? So my husband, a lot of women that are stay-at-home moms fall into depression, right? Because it's like mundane and they do the same thing over and over again. Yeah. I did it for a while and then we switched roles and it's okay. But anybody in like certain situations, if they're not fulfilling themselves, are going to have a hard time or they're going to deal with depression or different things. And so it's finding something that is really important that will fulfill you. And so encourage, and as a wife, like, right, encouraging that they go and do that because my husband, I know there's certain things that, and when you get into depression too, it's hard because they lose a lot of that or it's not as motivating to them or it doesn't fulfill them as much. But if you can kind of carve out those times to be it there and say like, no, you're going to go do this. For my husband, he won't do it. So he really likes to write. He's excellent at it. So I'm like, okay, well, guess what? Every couple months, I'm going to send you to California on a plane and you love the beach and you're just going to stay there for a couple days and you need to write, right? Like, or you need to do something that's fulfilling. And then he'll do all this guilt, right? Like, well, I can't do that or I need to do this or I want to do this. But it's saying, nope, like you really are going to get out there.
And recognizing those parts of them that need to be fulfilled.
Yeah, because if you're not living for anything, then why would you live? Like if you're not doing something you love and then all you're doing is dealing with the crap, like even when he loves he loves my kids and he loves me and there's good aspects of it, but that's not his core or who he is, right? And so if I have my family and that's great, but then I struggle with X, Y, and Z and this is all shit, right? Like it's super hard.
So you've got to find those
then
pieces
where,
of him.
why am I living? Because it gets to a point where my family isn't a good enough reason to live. Because in his brain, he brings them down more than he lifts them up, right? So there's all this stuff that doesn't make sense, but that goes through in a lot of people's heads, right? And so they can't just be living for their family, right? Because they love their family and that part's great. Because they'll start, if they're dealing with nothing positive for themselves and their core, they're just going to feel like I'm more of a burden for them though.
That's a great tip.
And so
you have to find what drives them, what makes them come alive, and you have to encourage them and push them to do it. I think that's a great example. Like go to the beach and write. Yeah. So it's a beautiful example. So Revive Brain Chow has been specifically designed for vets. Has your husband been able to try that or use that?
Yes, yeah. And so it's funny because for the longest time, he'd be like, oh, Revive's great, except for one vet. It just doesn't seem to be working on. That would be my husband. And so what's great about that is, well, if you do an MRI in his brain, he actually has physical evidence now because of his chronic PTSD. And so his memory is super, super shot. And when you're trying to stay positive about yourself and keep your ego up, but you can't remember anything, that's super difficult. I mean, supposed to pick up the kids, and he's been up to 2 hours late. But I work the entire state, and so if I'm too far away, it's like there's nothing I can do. Unless I'm just trying to get a hold of him,
so there's
right?
not another option. He's got to do it.
And so we have all these tools in place and apps that I can change and totally direct him, but still sometimes he totally gets lost. So his focus and his memories are really, really bad, and that does not help your depression at all. So the first time we tried to revive, because his memory is so bad, he wasn't very consistent at taking it. And that's when we've actually adopted the caregiver phrase, which we never did the first 8 years of our PTSD journey. But the last 2 years, to really help him get better, like I have to manage things for him. I have to manage doctor's appointments and different aspects because he will just forget.
So that just relieves him of the stress of having to remember things that...
Well, he won't. He can't remember things. Anyways, at least he hasn't been able to, So the first time we tried to revive, I hadn't really stepped on that role as much as I should have because I was like, I'm already exhausted and I'm already dealing with so much stuff. Like 5
kids, a full-time job.
Can't you just schedule your own stuff or take your own pills or, you know what I mean? Like, can't you just do a little bit to help you be better? Which is my bad, right? But there's moments where you're just like, I'm done.
Trial and error. Here, do this all on your own. And then you realize that's not going to happen.
Yeah. Well, and you really do as a spouse. You want them to get better. It just can be exhausting. And sometimes you're just being a pain. I'm just being a pain. And so the first time he took Revive, I didn't really help out. I didn't make sure he took it every day or anything. And so then we thought we'd try again. And with it, we did the entire supplement package, the 4. Which I actually think really helped anyways. I think it helped more, but it also helped. It gave him a little bit more structure. And it's funny. It's hilarious because you know how you have the numbers on them.
1, 2, 3, 4.
He's told me multiple times that it has saved him because he would get in the cupboard and he would be lost. He would have no idea which one he was supposed to take because he wouldn't know. He can't remember.
That's really interesting. Because it was developed for guys to not have to think about.
But he has told me probably at least a dozen times, like I wouldn't have continued taking this if it didn't have that because I would get so confused and then I would get overwhelmed and I would probably stop.
That's great to hear.
So, but the second round we did it with that and then we were very consistent and we worked to schedule out and then he got in that routine that I think really helped him and it's really helped. We still have tons and tons and tons of struggles and we still deal with depression, suicidal thoughts. But the second time around, just being able to have him focus, he used to also go to the store and he would get lost and it was super frustrating. He's a big avoider too, so he doesn't like leaving the house. But if he had to, he'd go to the store, he could have a list and he could still get completely lost with the list, even if I had 3 things on where it took him 2 hours at a store.
Wow.
And now
that's part of PTSD.
You have memory issues. You have memory issues, or you have so much anxiety, right? Or there's just so much going on in your brain that you can't focus. It's just that fight or flight, right? You're constantly in it, and so there's too much adrenaline that you're missing a lot of stuff.
Too many things going through your mind.
But with Revive, you can actually go to the store now without a list and pick up a couple of things and come back.
That's pretty incredible.
But the boost in self-confidence, because he's always so down on himself. Like, right? His ego's already shattered. He used to be able to do a ton. After the military, he had a really good paying job. We had a 6,000 square foot house in a very expensive area. It was really, really good, and that was a big ego boost, which is why I say it, right? Like I could care less how big my house is, but it was a big ego boost for a guy to be like, I can provide this. And then to have PTSD totally crush him to where he can't do anything. Like you're already dealing with someone who's super, super fragile. Every guy is big on their ego. To where he could list a million things he's not doing, but when he can't even focus to remember like how old my kids are. Wow. Or when do I pick them up from school, even though I have 5 reminders on my phone, or I get completely lost anytime I go out, or I know where I'm driving and I have to pull over because I really have no idea where I am when I should, because I'm 2 blocks away from my house. So the little things I actually think can be bigger of an ego shatterer, because if I can't even do this,
it's
then
the
what
little
am I?
Things that we can focus on.
Yeah.
So people who are suffering.
Yeah.
You know, the day-to-day little tasks.
And it's the little tasks that are going to build up to the big tasks. So like right now, it's funny because he's trying to tolerate people. That's what he's practicing. Tolerating people.
That's great.
Because
putting
he's
his toe back in the social scene.
Well, because you need social, right? Mm-hmm. And so he's super, super afraid. And so even he's just trying to practice tolerating the people he actually already likes and his friends. And then we're really going to try to push it for more than that, because when you avoid too much and you don't have a social life, your depression will actually get worse because you need that. So it's the little things that will build up to bigger things. But for him, and like with anything, I feel like it crushes your ego more when it's little things, because they should be easy.
To the rest of the world.
Yeah, they should be easy. Mm-hmm. And they were to the point where, like before, the old me, right? The one that I always try to lean on and be like, oh, I want to be that. It's because they could do the little things.
Wow.
It's easier to adapt to like, oh, I'm going to try this new career now because I want to change. But the old me used to be able to do these little things.
You know, that's really, that's a powerful statement there. Head injuries in general, it's the little things that, you know, my dad had a head injury. So growing up with a dad with a head injury, it was the little things that got him in pickles, not the big things. And so I think that's really powerful that you say that Revive was able to help him go to the grocery store and remember items on a grocery list that he didn't even have to take.
He knows what grade my kids are in. Most of the time. He can't remember which teacher is which, but he knows their grade, and that's huge.
Impressive.
He has a deal with my kids that if he's more than 30 minutes late, he owes them a Frosty. But for the most part, like, he can go pick them up.
That is life-changing for a lot of vets who are dealing with the ability to remember.
And when you think about the little things, right, if I can do the little things, I don't feel as much of a burden on my family. I might not be doing the big things, or I might not be doing this, but I can do these little things that, you know, he's been doing better actually on like his own doctor stuff too, which is a big thing. We still have apps that help, but the fact that he can call and then put it in the app himself and then it will show up, you know, like he's much more reliable in a lot of those little things that now I don't have to do as many of those things. But usually when it comes down to the suicidal thoughts and when he's really hard on himself, it's because he feels like a burden. And if he can do the little things, he doesn't feel as much of a burden. Like he might not, I'm not going out and working every day, but I am being a dad and I'm doing these little things. I'm doing these things around the house and I'm not having to have my wife take care of me or be a burden to my kids.
I think you've really hit the nail on the head. An essential toolbox piece is really allowing people to be successful at the little things again, which has really hit me as something that we hadn't considered as, you know, support people in that situation. I just am so impressed by your resiliency, your like stamina, your ability to just keep going when the chips are down, and I admire you so much for the heroic person that you are. And I just want to thank you so much for opening up and sharing. This is life-saving. This is going to be life-saving information for people who are caring for somebody who is in that same situation or has lost the ability to remember or do the little things. And I think and
I don't think it fixes, right? Like I know I've heard you guys, right? This is not a cure.
No.
But you learn what works for your family anyways for those big things. And I really look at it as it's not going to be a cure, but it could be the reason my husband doesn't commit suicide.
Wow.
Because he has confidence in himself.
That's powerful. Jackie, thanks for being our superhero of the day. I know that this information that you're sharing is going to be able to help a lot of women and men. With these podcasts, our responses are incredible from the guys, from the vets specifically. They want to be able to help their women. They want to be able to, like you said, like be that support, be that structure. But a lot of them are suffering from PTSD and other issues that come from, you know, being in combat. So thank you so much for opening up and helping other families and there are so many families who are in similar situations. And I wish you nothing but the best. And Thank you so much.
You're welcome.